It is Wednesday, August 2nd, which means in just a few days, just a few more weeks, students will return back to the classrooms, which means it's almost time for them to get their back to school vaccinations. So with that being said, I do want to bring in Dr. Angela Myers. She is the Director of Infectious Diseases Division at Children's Mercy. Dr. Angela Myers, I appreciate you stopping by and doing this interview with us here at the live desk. I do want to start off just with a basic question and ask you the importance of back to school vaccinations.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to school vaccines are incredibly important as we think about all the things children need to stay happy and healthy as they start the new school year. It's a really good opportunity to check with your provider to see if they have everything they need to start kindergarten and then everything they need when they're going into middle school years and even throughout high school years.
So we all know during the year of 2020, we heard so much, in 2021 as well, we heard so much about the COVID-19 pandemic and getting those COVID-19 vaccines and boosters. Is that going to be required for the 2023 to 2024 school year for children?
You know, typically elementary, middle, high schools are not requiring the COVID vaccine to go to school. Previously, some colleges had. It'll be really important for people who are heading off to college this year to be checking with their specific university on whether or not they're requiring it.
And I also just wanted to ask you, Dr. Angela, have we seen a rise in COVID-19 cases here locally? I know that we're starting to see an uptick as far as nationally, those numbers, but how is it looking here locally?
You know, we continue to see a few cases every week as part of the regular or routine respiratory viral testing that our lab does for kids that are being seen with acute respiratory infections, but we're not seeing a big increase in the number of cases. What I will say is that there's also generally less respiratory infections in the summertime outside of the COVID pandemic when things were very weird. And so there's less respiratory testing going on overall.
Alrighty, so I do want to kind of shift back and focus primarily just on back to school vaccines. Do you happen to know what vaccines are required this year that parents should put on their agenda to make sure that their children have it?
Yeah, so, you know, the vaccines that are required are the same ones that have been required since before the pandemic, right? So all kids need to be vaccinated against measles, mumps, rubella. They need to be vaccinated against chickenpox. They need to receive the hepatitis B vaccines, the diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis vaccine. As a young infant, the Haemophilus influenza vaccine. So those things have not changed and those recommendations haven't changed. What we saw was a decrease in those vaccines being given during the COVID pandemic for a variety of reasons. One of the important reasons was that children were not going to the doctor as often and then not able to get those vaccines. There has been an increase since that time, but we're not still back up to where we were prior to the pandemic happening.
So definitely want to urge parents to get out there and make sure that their children are vaccinated. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And are there any illnesses that parents should be concerned about going into this new school year? I know that flu season comes around every single year and that parents definitely have that on their radar, but are there any new illnesses that parents should be aware of?
You know, it's really the same ones that we think about. So croup is really common in the fall. Of course, influenza, as you mentioned, starts to increase in the fall. So does that RSV, which we've, had some major episodes of RSV during the pandemic that were problematic. And those routine, regular respiratory viruses too also become problematic as the weather gets colder, as we're indoors more, as we're around each other more. It is easier to propagate those viruses and pass them from person to person. And so we need to do, in addition to vaccination, we need to do all the things we can do to keep ourselves healthy.
And Dr. Angela, I also just want to ask you, when you guys see students or children starting to come in throughout the school year, are most of them typically not vaccinated at all, or are they vaccinated?
Most children really are vaccinated. I think that oftentimes parents think their child is fully vaccinated and are surprised to find out that they may have missed one or two along the way, which is why it's always good to have that conversation at these physical visits, at the well child visits, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and they actually haven't missed anything. Because it's hard to keep track. There are quite a few, and there's several doses of each one. And so it's always nice to have that conversation, make sure, yes, they are up to date, or hey, there's one it looks like that was missed for, a variety of reasons, let's make sure we get that one today.
Vaccines, they can be scary. I know I am afraid of getting any type of shot, but I know that they are very much important. Where can parents find a full list of what is required this year?
The CDC website is really good at helping parents to navigate what is required by age. So in the young age groups and as well as the adolescent vaccine series. So that is very, very helpful. How many doses are needed for each vaccine and at what age you should get it. They also have a really nifty calculator to help people, if they do have missed doses, figure out what they need to get and when to get fully caught up. So that's a really nice it's a really nice kind of one-stop shopping for a couple of different ways to look at vaccines.
Perfect. Dr. Angela, is there anything else that you would like to add that I have not asked you? I've been tracking our comments here on Facebook, and I don't see any questions for you, but I do want to just ask you if there's any final touches to this interview you would like to add.
The only thing that I would also mention is that flu vaccine is not largely available yet. We just hit August. It's not typically available till later in September. And a lot of kids will already have received those vaccines in order to start school. So I would just recommend, that parents put a little reminder in their calendar to ask their pediatrician or their provider about the flu vaccine so that they kind of get it in their idea that they need to get that done sometime later this fall. And in addition to that, if they haven't received a COVID vaccine, to consider that as well.
Perfect. All righty. Again, this is Dr. Angela Meyer. She is the Director of Infectious Diseases Division at Children's Mercy. Again, I want to thank you, Dr. Angela, for joining me here at the live desk. We appreciate it so much. An important conversation. Of course, we will be back with your top stories so far today, coming up possibly at around 2:30. So be sure to tune back in at around then.